photo painting is a simulation of traditional fine art. And what we are doing when we photo paint in the digital world is we are trying to simulate the look of the oil and the watercolor the way we are accustomed to having it in the traditional world. So if I want to replicate a watercolor painting, a digital watercolor, I need to replicate the look. I need to simulate the look. And the same is with the oil. So when you think of oil, the first thing that comes to mind is low key. And another thing that comes to mind is usually it's printed on canvas. And when you think of watercolor, you think of medium to high key. And the final outcome, the output, is on watercolor paper. Okay, so now we know that what you print on makes a big difference in the simulating of what you're going to try to translate. So I have here two images. They both were photographed by the late Don Blair. And let me show you the original photographs. We have over here Ashley, and we have on the right Ashley as well. They both were photographed with a dark background. It is photographed in a low key. I purposely have the image of the same subject in both images. They both are low key, except that the one on the left, because she's wearing a light blue t-shirt, I had leeway. I decided to paint her as a watercolor. I thought it would translate nicer. The painting on the right was translated as an oil, and I painted it edge to edge, and the output was on canvas. So it looks to me, that's my digital oil. Because it's an evening gown and it's very classy, it lent itself more to a classy traditional oil. And the one on the left, it was spunky and she was very sporty, and it lent itself to be painted as a watercolor. Okay, so what makes the digital image, what makes the digital painting called a watercolor or an oil? It has to do with the simulation, meaning it's all in the background. If the background is high key and you have a white border around it, room for you to come around and paint and to pull your paints out and to blend them out nicely, it's going to look like a watercolor, especially if you're going to print it on watercolor paper. And the same thing is with oil. Paint it edge to edge, no borders, and wrap around the canvas, and it's going to look like the traditional oils. And let me show you now another example. Let's come back here. Excuse me. There we go. So I'm going to put these on the side for now. And let me take out the next image that I'm going to be showing you. Over here, I have here an image of a bride. And in the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to do levels adjustments and to prepare the image for painting. But here, first let me interpret how I'm going to paint her. Obviously, I'm showing you already on the right that I interpreted her as a watercolor. Why did I want her as a watercolor? She's outdoors, it's a bride, it's high key. It translates to be a watercolor, and I printed her on watercolor paper. So how do I go about preparing this image for watercolor? I come in here, the first thing is it's got to get a canvas size. It has to get a white border. So I usually start between 2 to 3 inches. I'm going to put in 3. And I'm going to put in a white border. So by adding a white border to the image, when I bring it into Painter, and I will show you when we go through the blenders category, how I will blend out the gown, but I need room where to blend it out. So here, the white border gave me room, and that's what you see that I did over here. Let me put her aside. And because I gave myself the white border, I was able to paint out the gown, and this really looks like a watercolor. And I'm going to get in a little closer because watercolors blend out nice and they fade out, and I needed that white border. So, rule number 1, you want to replicate watercolor, add a white border. Number 2, your final output will be on watercolor paper. Oils, you want to paint edge to edge, and you want to output on canvas. Okay, how we use the brush strokes And what type of brushstrokes and which way we're going to paint, that we're going to discuss in Painter. This process, this part of the learning is the beginning. It's the sketching process. I use Photoshop to decide how I'm going to interpret my image, to prepare my image, to do all my retouching, resizing, everything that needs to be done. It's my sketching process. I do all my sketching and thoughts in Photoshop. And once the image is all sketched out, I proceed to apply my paints and to do all my paintings and highlights and shadows, and that's where Painter comes in. And when I'm finished with Painter, I come back to Photoshop, and that's when I go and proceed to do my output, and I print out of Photoshop. So, again, here's the word of simulating. We are simulating traditional, and since there are steps in the traditional world where you have a sketch step and then you have the painting step, think of Photoshop as your sketching step. This is where you think, you sketch out your image, and you prepare it for Painter. Now let me show you another image. This image here is a definite Rembrandt. I can't see this as a watercolor. I cannot see putting a white border on it. It looks like it would be rich with oils. It's got the Rembrandt rich colors, and I'm going to paint it edge to edge, and my final output will be on canvas. And I print all my images on the new Canons, on the IPFs, the 5000s and the 8000s. Those are my new toys. So we'll talk a little later about the different brush strokes and the Rembrandts and so forth. Right now, let me get to the next step, which is to prepare the image. Let's prepare the image so it has everything it needs to be ready for your paint and your brush strokes. And let's go.